So I just want to welcome everyone here. We are excited to have Dr. John Ranck and Dr. Rhonda Ford here today. We're going to be doing a presentation on the practice toolkit developed by Dr. John Ranck and have some students perform. I will let you guys take it from here. My job today is mostly going to be to facilitate, make sure the Zoom, functions. I'll keep an eye on the chat if anybody has questions throughout the presentation and bring those forward. And we're going to start, I believe, by just going through the practice toolkit a bit. And then you guys we have two players today to kind of go through these pieces and test out some of these options.
Why don't we have John introduce himself and tell about how he created the toolkit?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I wanted to be sure I thank both Rhonda and Alex. Rhonda for thinking enough of the toolkit that she wanted to put this program together and did all the arranging, and then Alex for agreeing to host it and giving us this chance to share it with you all. So thank you both. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
And my goal in developing the toolkit was to give you procedures to use when you're working on a piece of music, especially when it's brand new, to use your practice time most efficiently and be able to identify those places where you need to work and give you several different ways to play them and solidify your knowledge of the notes and make you more confident in your performance. And I do want to give a shout out to the man who gave me most of the tips, who was Henry Zlotnick, who was probably about my age when I was studying with him in New York in the 80s. And he was a Barrere student. He played at the NBC Radio Orchestra under Toscanini. He was in Sousa's band and quite a character. And he would be in lessons with Barrere, and Barrere would play, ask him to play something, give him a demonstration. And Henry would ask him, how do you do that? And I will spare you my fake French accent. And Barrere would say, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that. I just do that. And so Henry would then go home and try to figure out, as he put it, how the hell he did that, and came up with many of these practice techniques that I found just almost magical in enabling us to quickly absorb what are the notes on the page and put them in our fingers. So thank you, Henry. And so let's talk just briefly, because you have the definitions of the toolkit. Thank you, Alex, for providing that with everybody. So I'm not going to read the definitions. I'll leave that up to you as we're working through them. We will be applying them to the pieces as they become appropriate, and you can check them out as we're doing that and get a verbal explanation of what we're doing with the notes on the page. The one I do want to kind of point out is link and chain, which is any melody or even a piece of music can be thought of as a series of links. And the most difficult interval, the most difficult measure, the most difficult passage is a link in that chain, and a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so what link and chain enables you to do is abstract those parts, work on them, get them solid, and put them back together. And I want to particularly suggest that you use that in etudes, for instance. Anderson, there's usually a measure here, a measure there that are just gnarly, and the rest of it is not as challenging, and it's a big ego boost to play through the stuff you can play and basically, waste your practice time, because those few measures are always going to be kind of, and if you take them out and work them till they're up to the level of everything else, then it's maybe less ego satisfying, but I think in the long run more efficient. And the other one I want to point out is back to front, which is a way of practicing a passage where you start with the last note, then you do the last 2 notes and the last 3 notes and the last 4 notes. And that enables you to always be familiar with what's coming up. And I've found that to be not only helpful in working on passages, but also working on entire pieces. And as you get toward a performance, maybe even an entire movement, because the end of a piece or the end of a movement or the end of a passage, difficult passage, is where we've gotten slightly distracted. Things haven't gone quite. If the end is the weakest because you've practiced from the beginning to the end each time, that's where things can get pretty iffy as far as successful performances go. And if you've done the back to front, it's really the part that you're the most familiar with. So just in terms of general use of these tools, I'd suggest those 2 in particular as being very helpful. And why don't we, with that, start with the Mendelssohn?
Yes. So I'm Ronda Ford, and I wanted to kind of say a little bit about how I learned about the toolkit. John, I think that it was in a magazine like Flute Talk or something. And I remember seeing it. And then I went and had a lesson with John Bailey, and he had it posted on his board, and we were talking about how much we loved it. So that's how I've gotten to know this John. And I want to introduce you to my student, Carly Larson.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Harley.
Carly. I'm a freshman student here at UTC.
Maybe say what that is.
No, that's University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. I'm a music ed major here, and I have been playing flute for 8 years, but I also have been playing the saxophone for 8 years. So I'm kind of a little bit of a multi-instrument kind of person, but.
And did you have any private lessons before?
I never had lessons before I came to college. So Dr. Ford was my first person giving me lessons.
Wow. Lucky you.
So I thought we're gonna I'm gonna put Carly on the spot, and she's been a really good sport. Okay. So I thought we would just talk a little bit about what to look for in sight reading, and then she has never looked at or worked on the Mendelssohn Scherzo, and so I think she's very brave. And so we're going to go through this and have her try a little bit. And then, John, I thought you could try some of your rhythms with her on that.
Okay.
So do you want to tell us about the stars in sight reading?
Yeah. So the stars here, the first thing you start with the S, you look for all your sharps and flats. So, or is it that's this
here,
right?
I'll pull this up.
Okay, cool. So for this one, obviously it's in B flat, or at least I haven't read through okay, yeah. It stays in B flat.
Minor. Yeah.
And then the time signature, there's okay, it's in 3/8. For accidentals, there are quite a few in these runs. The rhythms here are a little bit challenging for sure. There's a lot of 16th note runs, so that's going to be an adventure. And then the signs here,
I don't think that we have any.
Yeah, there's no repeat signs. So there's a fermata though.
Yes. Okay. So we're gonna give Carly just a little bit of time. Do you want to try to read from? This is a pickup, 2 measures or a measure and 1 note before letter P. And why don't we just have her go, even maybe just to
like the second line.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we give her a few minutes just to kind of look through before she starts, because I think in any orchestral audition, I think they will expect you to take a little of time to look at the sight reading part to do exactly what you, and so Carly?
Yes, Carly.
Well, she's doing that. I just wanted to point out, because folks might not be familiar with what stars is, that STARS is an acronym for the first things to look at when you're getting ready to sight read a piece. And since folks haven't had this PDF except maybe just the last few minutes, they might not have gotten to that part of the handout that explains that. So that's what, in case anybody was curious, that's what STARS is.
Alex, are you able to pull that up for them to see briefly, or do they all have access to the PDF?
That's all that's been put in the chat.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
gave it to everybody, but I can.
Okay.
Let's see if I can do this here.
And Carly, I want to let you know that my student who will be playing today, Earl Lawrence, who I see up there in the list there, he also plays both flute and saxophone.
Nice.
So that's a happy little coincidence.
Yeah.
So Earl, you want to
Sorry.
say hi?
Okay. Well, are you feeling brave?
He might
Yeah.
not
Okay.
have his mic on.
Yeah, just a little. Here, I will actually mark it. So cool. Okay. Good. You missed a few notes, but it was very, very good. Okay. So, John, would you like to go ahead and start with some of your rhythms with Carly?
Okay, all right. So let's see. Yeah, let's do the rhythmic permutation, Carly. And just one and measure after P, measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where the measure starts with an F sharp.
Yes.
Remember the key signature when you get to that E, it's an E flat.
And I had the two sodas.
Two sodas? Oh, I'm gonna put it down.
Oh.
Which one was that?
It was the ginger beer.
And Alex, could we maybe ask people to mute their mics if they're
So on the rhythms from the toolkit, we were just going to take like the pickup note, the first two measures, and then the downbeat of that next measure. I wanted to just have a little part so we could really try several of the rhythms.
okay? All right. So let's go with let's leave off the upbeat, the D there, and just start on the G and pretend that it's like an eighth note in a 16th. So it's long, short, long, short, long, short, long.
Yeah.
Okay. It is an E natural though, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry,
just
that
wanna
one's
make
an E
sure.
natural. Yeah,
Okay.
go.
It is so hard to do that.
Okay, wait, all right, wait, just take a breath and
Okay.
start on the C, and it's long, short, long, short, long, short. Okay, now that was great. Thank you. And let's now do it. And thank you, Rhonda, for asking her to start slowly, because one of the things I like to remind people is that you can't run before you walk, you can't walk before you crawl. And so you got a little confused with the long, short. So let's back off the tempo even a little more,
Okay.
because you've never seen this music before. You're sitting in front of a camera. You know, I'm a little nervous. You're probably a little nervous. You're doing great. So let's, now we're going to go short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. And let's go about bum, 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 bum. So you can kind of keep all this in your head with the rhythm being consistently short, long, short, long, short, long. Okay.
Oh, E flats. I'm so sorry, guys.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. Now, in the business, we call those clams. Okay. And if you're in a performance and everybody's playing, wrong notes all over, it's called a clam bait. All right. So let's allow clams at the moment, just to get the rhythm. But do your best to keep the two flats in your head.
I'll get it.
Because you usually in this place, if you want an E natural, it's written in.
Yes.
It's all right. So try it again. Short, long, short, long. Yes, yes. Now, another reason to go slowly is to avoid places like that E natural, because the first time you play something, and yes, and write it in, right? That's the Tom Neifringer has a story about a new piece being like an uncarved board. And as we practice in that board, we're carving the contours of the melody. And if we're not careful and we make a little slip like that, and then we begin, if a marble is going down that path, it gets to that point and there's sort of an equal opportunity for it either to go the first way we played it or the second one. And it takes a lot of, to mix my metaphors, a lot of carving to get that path correct, or a lot of ironing to get that wrinkle in our brain out. And if we can avoid making the notes mistakes in the first place. So let's now, before we move on, let's talk about, once we've gotten a piece sight read or written or practiced slowly, and we want to begin to speed things up, how do you with a metronome, how do you usually do that?
I normally go up by 4 clicks.
And then what?
Increase by 4 clicks.
And then another 4 clicks?
Yeah, I do like I do the hardest portion at like 4 clicks higher than what I normally play it, and then I keep taking, I do it at the hard, I do only the hardest part. I do it up to the fastest tempo.
Okay. All right.
Increase it by 4 clicks.
All right. And do you ever reach a point where you can't seem to get it faster? You hit a wall or not?
Every now and then, yes. I feel like sometimes I'm like, wow, I can play everything else at the right tempo, but then I get to this and I'm like, wow, I just like, if I could get it 8 clicks faster, it'd be on time, but I can't.
All right. Well, and this is for everybody too. I'm going to suggest something I learned from a trumpet player in the Union newsletter years ago, who found that exact problem. He was practicing these excerpts and he wanted to get it faster, and he would constantly just go like that. What he discovered was, if he goes up 3 clicks, then back 2, up 3 clicks, then back 2, I call that the wave motion of, so you're up a little bit and then you're back, but not quite where you were. And you will be surprised in about 10 minutes how much you've been able to increase the speed, and it may help you avoid hitting that wall. So I throw that out there. You can use it if you want it.
Yeah,
But
Can I add one thing to that too?
please.
I also try to stress to students to please start it at the speed you can play it correctly. Don't try to start faster than you're ready to play it.
Exactly. Sam Barron had the idea of your magic number. And the magic number for you is whatever speed it is, that you can play it smoothly without mistakes and not be anxious about it, and just feel confident that you can play it. That's your magic number. And thank you, Rhonda, for reminding about that. That's where you start. And it doesn't matter if it's 80 clicks slower than what the tempo is marked. That's where you need to start, because that's where this works. And otherwise you're building up all kinds of just, my tension goes right into my shoulders. And you can avoid doing that by being kind to yourself and finding your special magic number and starting there. Okay, so those extra toolkit ideas aside now.
And I just want to say one other thing too. Carly's a freshman music major and she's pretty mature. She listens to me, which I appreciate. Some of my middle school and high school students, they are obsessed with the tempo marked on their music. And they'll say, well, it has to go at 120. And I said, okay, but we have to play it correctly at the slowest speed first. So they're impatient. Would it be okay if I tried a couple of my additional rhythms?
Absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
And then maybe we could do some of the back to front.
Right. Yep. Sounds like a good idea.
Okay. And I know, John, you always say, I use whatever note it starts with and I make that the starting note. But sometimes I do start a note on the downbeat, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But so Harley, you're going to experiment here. We're going to try, and if you're looking at the rhythms from the toolkit, this is on letter B, and it's, my friend did this and I didn't really have time to correct it, but what I really want is to do a quarter note.
Mm-hmm. And for the audience, we've got the rhythms from the toolkit back in the back of the handout.
Quarter note and then triplets, quarter note, triplets. Okay.
Okay.
So go very slow. So it's going to be. Do you want to try some together?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay. Here we go. Keep going.
Oh.
Let's go here. Good. Okay.
Okay.
You get the idea.
Yeah.
And then I do the opposite where we do the triplet first. So yeah, try just a little of that. Good. Okay. I think they get the idea.
Okay.
John, would you like to go over some of the back to front?
Yes. All right. So why don't we do a little back to front, and let's go to the last line, and we're going to start on 2 measures before the 2 measure rest there. Okay. On the D, and we're going to say that that's the end.
Okay.
All right. So you want me to just start at that?
Just play the D.
You want that one, I think.
No, the 2 measures before the two measure rest. The D above the step. Yeah.
Sorry.
Brilliant. Yeah, that was so good. I'd like to hear it again. Okay, now let's add the C. Now, let me ask you, are you double tonguing or single tonguing this?
I'm single tonguing this.
Do you know how to double tongue?
Not very well.
We
All right, all right. Well, this would be a great.
Not quite there yet.
All right. Well, I would, as you learn double tonguing, I'm not sure what Rhonda thinks about this, but I like to use this. And the reason I'm asking is because eventually, if you're working this etude or this, well, it is an etude, but excerpt up for performance, you're going to have to be double tonguing it. Well, I'm sure that maybe there are some people in the world that can single tongue it at the tempo that it goes, but so eventually you'll be double. I won't ask you to do that now because it's not fair. You've not worked on that. So go ahead now, just the C and the D. No, just the note before the D and the D, the C and the D.
I think that.
Yeah. Again, I'd love to hear it. Now let's pretend you've done that a bunch of times. Now let's add the B flat, C, and D. Okay, and now let's add the A. And so for the audience, I would suggest you not necessarily do each step once. Depending on the complexity of the passage, you might want to do it a few times, but in the interest of today, we're going to move through it more quickly now. Start with a G. Okay, now, not too fast, too soon. A little more slowly. Let's add the A. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, now let's start the B flat. Now the A. Okay, so that's how the back to front works. And I'm just wondering, with the time, how much more time do we have, Alex?
Another solid 5 minutes or so.
Okay,
If you need a
right.
little more, that'd be fine too.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have enough time for Earl. So, okay.
Are there any questions at this point, maybe?
Yeah, that'd be great too. Anybody have any questions? Nothing in the chat, but if anybody has anything, they feel free to pipe up, unmute, ask any questions if you like.
Okay. Well, and we could do several more rhythms. John, I was going to say, I usually make the students do it 3 to 5 times.
Okay.
When they're doing the back to front.
Right.
And if they mess up on the second time, I make them go back to 0. I'm a little bit mean, but actually, Joran Markuson does that. And so at Wild Acres, he'll say to somebody, "You don't know this run well enough. Okay, you need to do it 5 times in a row correctly." And if they mess up on the third time, he said, "Okay, back to 0," and he does it in a very nice way.
Right.
Maybe, do you want to go to some with your student now?
Well, I was going to let you work with him, but let's just do a couple more things like the movable fermata.
Oh, okay.
So let's pretend, Carly, that we're now all right, so let's go back to rehearsal P.
Okay.
In the first measure there, just say all right, no, let's go to that place where you missed the E flat.
Okay.
Okay. Now this is going to be a perfect place if you consistently miss that E flat and played an E natural. So let's just play the measure before, start in the F sharp in the measure before, play to the F sharp before the E flat, put a fermata on that F sharp.
Okay. you said F sharp before the E flat, so that's the one that's 4 measures later.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Well, the measure where you missed the E flat.
Yes, that one. You want it? You want a fermata there?
Begin just begin the measure before,
Okay.
and that measure that starts on an F sharp, right?
So, yeah, there.
Okay.
So since you missed the E flat, you're going to put the movable fermata on the note before you missed the note. So in other words, put the fermata on the F sharp. Okay. And hold that until all the twitching in your fingers stops, wanting to go to the E natural, and then play the E flat.
Okay.
So it can be 5 seconds, it can be 10. You know, make sure that the next thing you're going to do is absolutely an E flat and then play the E flat.
Okay.
And about bum, 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 bum.
Okay.
Right, one more time, please. Right. Now, one last one, and then we can move on to Earl, is the articulation alteration. So this is a perfect A2, which means if it's all tongued, you play it all slurred. And if it's all slurred, you play it all tongued. So now just do that same passage there, slurred, just from the F sharp to the F sharp. Right. Now the benefit to that for the folks is when we're articulating, there's a slight bit of silence between the notes that when we slur them, it's filled in. So any little wobbles or inconsistencies of holes closing and things like that are disguised when we articulate. But when we're slurred, we discover where maybe we need to tighten things up just a little bit. And before we move off of this, for those of you who are working on this up to tempo and are practicing it maybe for an audition, sometimes they will ask you to start, well, as I'm practicing not just the etude, but the entire movement, which is another sort of important thing to do. There's a 5-measure rest between where the flute plays its last little motif and then comes in with a big solo. And I like to make sure that I'm not holding my breath and counting. And so I'm at about a measure like this, I'm going, and then I play. And I find that I'm much more oxygenated and I can much more easily make it to that first 8th note where I can finally take a breath. And then I don't necessarily need to take as big a breath. And I've just found that to be extremely helpful in getting through this etude where there's really very little places to breathe, because it's basically just you and the string section. And it's magical. It's absolutely wonderful piece of music, but it's a big challenge for us poor little tutors.
Well, I want to mention one thing about that too. I have heard Wally Kujala saying that he makes his students play the 4 measures and then count the rest and come in, because that's also, we practice so much to make sure we're going to get the low D out. And then when you have to do it in context of the music, he finds that helpful to practice it that way too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And in case it wasn't clear what I was doing in breathing, I was going in, out, in, out, in, and break, and then breathe. I mean, play.
Bravo. I think we should give Carly a hand for being a really good sport.
Thank you.
Did
All
we have
right.
any wonderful yet?
Not in the chat, but if anybody has any they want to bring up, happy to
Okay.
take them now.
And John, I actually thought that you could go ahead and work with your student and we would listen, but because I'd like to see kind of how you work with your own student doing some of the things from your toolkit.
All right, okay, yeah.
If
That's
that's okay.
fine. So Earl, you want to make sure that you have your microphone on so we can hear you. So everybody, this is Earl Lawrence. He's a student of mine, and if his mic is on, I can give him a chance to give a little autobiography.
Thank you. Oh,
Well,
there he is. Okay.
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. I'm Earl Grant Lawrence. I actually went to school at Blair Academy back in
Oh,
back in the 70s in Nashville.
he's from Nashville.
Oh, wow.
Even more in common.
So I play saxophone, flute. I was good on clarinet for a minute there. But anyways, uh, and I taught for, well, public school, like band for I guess 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So I'm retired now.
Where do you live now?
Oh, okay, I live in Boston.
Oh,
I
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I live in Mattapan. Also went to Boston Conservatory. That's how I got here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I studied composition. So
And he has written something for the Papatsakis flute competition. They commission works for their annual competition. And Earl, you've written one, right?
yes, in the early 90s,
I'm
92.
impressed.
So we'll see what happens with the flute. Okay, I'm working on the recitative Fantasia from Franck, Caesar Franck Sonata in A for a violin, but I like it for flute. And I'm starting at measure. Uh, well, it's letter B where it says our tempo, but the problems I have are third measure of letter B.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I'm gonna play it slow, and then John tell me what to do.
All right, so Earl, remind me again where you're starting there. Is it
The,
with a low C?
oh, yeah, it's a third measure after B, below C.
Okay. And you're having the trouble where again?
Well, that section I kind of have trouble with. Accidentals, keeping a steady tempo,
Uh-huh. All
and
right, and which accidentals, because which accidentals do you consistently miss? Because that would be a perfect place to use the movable fermata.
all right, good. The ones I really miss a lot are the one. Okay, let me get. Let's see. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I guess it's the eighth measure after the C.
Okay, and that measure starts with what note?
C natural or B sharp. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, that's an important difference. All right, and which accidental is it?
Okay, the double sharp. That time I got it.
All right. All right. Well, let's use the movable fermata there, and let's put a movable fermata on the G sharp right before that F double sharp.
Okay.
And then play the right. Good. Now let's try it one more time. And do me a favor. Get a little lubrication on your pinky to make that slide a little bit. By the way, audience, this is a great place if you need to slide around the pinky on the foot joint. If you can lubricate your pinky a little bit ahead of time. I have some pieces where it says nose grease, and I used to get it from my nose, but then if somebody's looking from the side, it's a little odd. So I discovered that behind the ears is a little bit better for that. It just makes life a whole lot easier. So let's see if that B sharp to D sharp is a little bit easier now. And one more time with the move with the fermata. Okay, now that's good. Thank you. I got to warm this up a little bit before I try to give you any kind of a go. I'm hearing a little bit of this. You're making the B sharp longer than a 16th. So can you? That's it. Okay, good. Now, you mentioned keeping a steady tempo.
Yes.
So let's try the movable bar line, because I do want to not ignore that, because it is also just a magical tool for evening out difficulties. But let's not do that in this particular environment, because it's just kind of in the swampy lowlands.
Yeah. Oh,
That I like to sort of think of flute playing as a country, and the low register is sort of these swampy lowlands, and the high register are like the big mountain area, and the rest of the country is the middle range. And it's important as we practice that we don't work on things that are too much not in the extremes. We really need to kind of make sure that we're familiar with the territory that's a little bit wet and swampy, as well as making sure that we're not going to fall off a mountain peak because we're not familiar with the terrain up there. So let's, with that in mind, let's move a little bit more to out of the swampy lowlands to do the example of the movable bar line. So why don't we start on the line above that, Earl, the very last measure that starts with an F and an E flat.
yes.
Now, can you let's just play the first from the F to the D flat. Okay. Okay, good. Now, pretend that the F is an upbeat. Let's slow it down. And so it's and now we're going to go to the B flat. Ba dee da 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 dee da 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 dum. And then go to the B flat, D flat, B. I'm sorry, the B flat after the D flat. My mistake. My mistake. Yeah. Right. Make sure though that the upbeat is also a 16th note. I heard. Right, now do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was so good. I'd like to hear it again, please. You slip back into the long upbeat. Right, now let's slow it down a little bit more, because as we move through this, it's it gets a little challenging. Now we're gonna go da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da, and then go 1/16 note beyond where you ended last time. Yes, that's it. Now slow it a little bit down, and just because, you know, it's getting tricky, and try it one more time, please.
Okay.
Yep, yep. Now, well, let's try that one more time. Now that for me, well, I won't even tell you. Let's go the next step further. It's now ba dee da dum, ba dee da dum, ba dee da dum. So go even more slowly. Ba dee da dum, ba dee da dum, ba dee da dum. Yeah, please, one more time. Good. Now, we've done articulation alteration, we've done movable fermata, we've talked about rhythmic permutation, we've talked about back to front. The one thing we haven't done is link and chain. I mean, in tonight we've talked about that. So I'd like to, is there, besides that beat with the low B sharp, is there another measure that you find particularly challenging? Earl.
Yeah, I'm reading through in my head. Okay, I guess it's measure 4. It has a B flat that's tied over, and
Uh-huh.
down to a C sharp, and then the flat is, I guess, the ties. I have a tendency to skip a tie.
All right. Well, all right. Okay, that's actually, let's back off of the link and chain for a minute. Take out the ties.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Play it for us once without the ties. And let's just do the measure from the B flat to the downbeat of the next. Good. Now, can you make sure that I know the second beat of the tie is actually the downbeat of the beat, right?
Okay.
The first one is a downbeat, but then all
Oh,
the other ties, it's the second one. That you understand what I'm saying?
yes, yes.
Okay. Right, right. Now you also, let's try it one more time. So that's actually, now play it with the tie, but make sure that the tie, you increase the airspeed slightly on that downbeat, so I know where the beats are. Yeah, yeah. So that is important, because as I'm talk about in a second, it's important that we don't disguise the meter with our playing. And this is a brilliant piece of writing here, because as the piano has each of those beats, and so it's this almost magical thing where the flute plays a note and then the piano plays the beat, and it's only a 16th note apart, but it's dum dum dum. It's just counterpoint that I'm always amazed when I come across passages like that, and imagine what it was like to wake up in the morning as Franck and have this idea in my head that that's what I wanted to put on the page. It's just boggles my mind sometimes how things like this come to be. So let's just talk one last bit about link and chain to give folks an idea of what that is. And let's just pretend that measure, the end of the line there that we're just working on, the second beat with a D flat, E flat, G flat, B flat.
Okay, you said I'm
The,
sorry.
the end of the row that, or the line that we were just on.
Okay.
Measure starts with an F and a low F and an E flat.
Oh, that one. Okay.
So let's just do the second. Well, let's just take the first beat because that's easier. The first beat, let's just pretend that's a particularly challenging thing for you. No, Earl, I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, what note am I starting on? Sorry.
The downbeat there.
Downbeat. Am I hitting the B flat or F?
The F, E flat, G flat, B
Oh,
flat beat.
oh.
Yeah. Now, that was just a perfect example of articulation alteration.
Okay.
He unbidden, Earl gave us another example of playing a passage that is all slurred tongued. That was great. Now, let's just do the first beat and pretend that that's the link you're going to work on. Right. Yeah. So thank you, Earl. And does anybody have any questions?
John, maybe I noticed when I was kind of doing a little research
Yeah.
that you have an additional toolkit or an extra toolkit. Did I see that?
Do I? Well, I have other things on my website. Various pinky exercises. There's an exercise for learning how to slide around the foot joint. It's based on Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Ba, da, 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 dum.
Okay.
So that's there in a couple of different keys to get E flat to C or I forget what the other two are. There is a flute choreography or a finger choreography for the Etude Moderne.
And so is that all free and available on your website?
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah. johnranck.net. It's in the studio of my website. And so
Good. I wanted to say one thing. When your student, he said B sharp and then he said C. I teach, well, I mean, I have college students, I have students of all ages, but it drives me crazy when a student will say, okay, F sharp, well, that's a G flat, and C sharp, that's a D flat. And one of the things I've tried to stress to them is we need one of each letter in a scale. And when they start mixing things, that's when they have major problems
right.
in their scales. And I think with band students, they tend to think in flats. It's very hard for them to play in sharps. Yes, okay, Carly's shaking her head.
Well, the analogy that I like to use is that they mean entirely different things. SON and SUN sound the same, yes, but they mean entirely different things. And that's why, yes, C sharp and D flat are the same frequency, but depending on what universe you're in or what system, key, they mean very different things. Yeah.
Well, I want to tell you I have practiced the rhythmic variation when you say, okay, the first note starts on the second 16th note, and then the third 16th note, and the fourth 16th note. And that is very hard. But I think in all of this, my takeaway is that with all these different ways we're practicing it, our brain is focusing on something different each time, and that helps us learn the whole passage. Or
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Alex, I think we're about done unless you have any questions, or do you have anything you want to add?
I do not personally myself, but I will say that I will send an email to everyone who was here tonight and everyone who signed up for the class. And I'll make sure that your PDF is included in there as well as links to John's website so that everybody can have access to this. Because all this is like such great tools for practicing. Some I use myself, but didn't really have a name to put to them. So I really appreciate having like a, something to do and use with students and give it a name so that it's a
Well,
little more easier to use if you have a name for it.
yes, and it's funny too because I find that students, not Carly, she's a good one, but no, students they'll avoid the hard part. Like I'll say, okay, um, what are you afraid about in this piece? And they'll show me, and I'll say, okay, well, how did you work on that? Well, I didn't want to work on it because it was hard. And then that's when I pull out John's toolkit and I said, okay, let's go through this. And we might spend 5 or 10 minutes in a lesson, and then they can play the measure they were afraid of. And I said, okay, now what do you need to do on your own? Well, I need to do this on the other things. So I try to encourage my students not to practice the things that they already know. Let's focus on what we don't know.
Yeah.
And I know
So,
we want to play the fun part sometimes, but
Yeah.
well, that's what the toolkit is kind of designed to help people avoid, because yeah, it's a big ego boost to go sailing through stuff you can play and then just sort of accept the few measures here and there that aren't as good, when if you spend just a little bit of time with some of these tools on those challenging measures, you can bring them up to the level of the rest of the piece and then be able to sail through all of it. So I wanted to, before we, in the interest of encouraging people to practice, I wanted to end with the practice aphorisms, or
yes.
pointing out the practice aphorisms that are at the end of the toolkit. And one by Frances Blaisdell, and I'll let people read the toolkit as to what an impressive woman she was. Play anything 50 times slowly, and you'll not have a problem. Well, I will say yes, maybe when you're a teenager, 50 times slowly is enough, but you get into your 20s and your 30s and on, it might take more than 50 times slowly, but that's her little aphorism. Robert Dick says most note mistakes are rhythm mistakes first, so be careful of meter and beats. And my favorite, Henry Zlotnick, who we talked about at the very beginning, do it or forget it. And also wanted to point out that there are a couple of books by Tom Neifinger that I want to be sure that people know exist. One is called Music and the Flute, and it was published in '86, and it is his first book, and it has chapters on how we learn, with a section called Taking From or Studying With, basic concepts of playing, in which he talks about things like in and out tonation and why. There's another one, how to work on some of these things, with an entr'acte called The Frustrations of Baroque Music, and on track 2, The Frustrations of Teaching. And there's a chapter called I Got Rhythm, What About Meter? and a chapter on colors, which Tom Neifinger was a master at. He could make his flute sound like a clarinet. And the other book is called Beyond the Notes, that was published after he was after he died. And I'm pointing out these chapter titles because it gives you an idea of the wry sense of humor that man had that was just remarkable. Part one, playing and practicing, an introduction to imagination. Part two, musical musings, being transported by a musical phrase and meter. Part three, prescriptions and analyses, with actually analyses of the Mozart flute concertos, Gabriel Fauré fantasy, and orchestral excerpts. Survival in the music business, what work, inspiration, which comes first, auditions, final thoughts, and an appendix where he has written out a Telemann solo fantasy as a flute duet. And one last thing that he had saying about practicing that I hope people will enjoy. And so, what if, after a day of fixing your car and punching a mugger or two, you find out that your digital dexterity is downright dead? Well, then try experimenting with and improving your tone. Work on phrasing, even mentally, without the flute, and he spells flute P-H-L-E-U-G-H-T, or practicing attacks, musical that is, or maybe even just listening. So thank you, Tom.
Well, I want to say that, I have, John and I have known each other by email for several years. And in the summer, we had a meeting to talk about this presentation, but I have really enjoyed his descriptions of how to do things. And I think you're obviously a wonderful teacher, and your student did a great job. I think our students really, I'm very proud of them. So
yes, thank you, Earl.
Yes, and Alex, thank you so much for letting us do this. And I do hope, this was not necessarily for the high-end flutist. It was just, how can we practice and make progress each day?
Yeah, we want to have events and do things for all levels, so this is great. Yeah. Well, again, thank you, John and Rhonda, and thank you, Carly and Earl, for both playing for us. And I'll repeat again, we do all these for free on purpose because we want to give access to people, as many events as possible, learn, listen, and just have a great time. We will publish this on our social media and YouTube in a couple weeks, so it'll be able to watch it again, and I will send the file with this presentation and the book recommendations and a link to your websites. But thank you guys so much for doing this tonight.
Thank you all for zooming in.
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks, Alex and John.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn more about our guests, there's more information below. If you're a teacher, make sure to sign up for Club FCNY to unlock free shipping, extended trials, and commission for teachers, as well as other exclusive benefits for you and your students. As always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.